The individual was not created to be isolated, to be alone, without someone or someones to walk along with on this journey that we call life. Yet in our uncertain times, we have been blindsided by monumental moments, ones that have pushed each of us into a corner of questioning, tempting us not to test the thoughts that we think or fight with the feelings that we feel. And in this, many have been wedged within the chasm of confusion, filled more often than not with both fear and hope, somehow at the same time. Holding devices in our hands while wrestling with the vices in our hearts, we've sat at home, scrolling, refreshing, second-guessing the outcome of many overwhelming and emotional moments, waiting day by day for updates on what the world is up to and how it's doing, what humanity has its hand in and how it seems to be handling itself. And if we're left alone, the effects of isolation only grow as the days go by. Something happens to each of us when we see and experience sickness, when we deal with death and division, or experience the pains of political and racial tensions. And in each season, those very matters are ever rising, pulling us further and further apart as we feed into feuds over Facebook, exchange insecurities over Instagram, and take the tensions in our hearts to Twitter. You know, it was once said that we divide easily because we love shallowly. And loving shallowly comes at a significant cost. It costs us what we could have: faith, fulfillment, friendship, and freedom, hangouts, hugs, handshakes, and high fives, compassion, conviction, sympathy, and empathy. And ultimately, the safest place to find all of these things: community. The place where you speak, but you're also heard. The place where disagreements don't lead to division, yet they open us up to understanding. The place where our individual abilities collide to make a collective contribution. The place where we embody and embrace the beautiful truth that we belong to each other. The place where we don't wear our weight all by ourselves or try to run our race alone. Where we listen, lock arms, and lean on others so that we can be carried by community. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are again, Preemptive Love's Generation Peace, a place where we educate, where we equip, and we empower the next generation of peacemakers, you, to go out there on your campuses and in your communities to literally wage peace on your neighbor. I'm with two gentlemen today. I'm with James Rowe and I'm with Bam Ford, and they have done an incredible job creating what we now know as Atlanta Run Club, a safe place that is a community of equality, that is a community that is extremely inclusive, that is focused on fitness and care for one another. And so I want to introduce them to you today. So James, let's start with you, man. I would love for you just to kind of walk us into today slowly, if you want. Kind of tell us where you're from, who you are, what you do, how old you are you single, you got any ladies in your life? Tell us all the things, man. We want to know a little bit about you.
Yeah, man. So originally born from Los Angeles, actually. Come from an immigrant family. I identify as Korean American. My parents moved over from Korea in 1990, and shortly after I was born, 10 years later, whole family moved over to Atlanta. And ever since then, I've kind of like moved around to a lot of different places. Lived in Atlanta for a little bit, lived in Marietta, lived in Athens for college, back to Atlanta. And now like we have this run club that we mostly do the events and experiences like in the actual city of Atlanta. So kind of been all over, but my story is basically in career path, physical therapist by trade, strength coach. So I've kind of been in the fitness wellness scene for quite a while now, and the run club has kind of just been a natural production of what we've done.
My man Bam Ford, real quick, you want to tell the people a little bit, same way that James did, about yourself, who you are, what you do, why you are here with us today.
Yeah, for sure. So born in a small town of Vidalia, Georgia, moved to Atlanta in like 5th grade. completed, school and on the east side of Atlanta, so Stone Mountain. Bounced around a little bit, went to college, didn't complete it, left, found something different. Hopped around to a couple of different career paths, but been doing fitness for now probably about 8 years. And like James said, we now have this conglomerate of a run club, and just been developing myself as we continue to build like a strong community.
There were some things that happened just a few hours away down the street, and if it's okay with both of y'all, I'd love to dive into that and just talk about it a little bit. The first thing that I think in my mind as it relates to fitness, as it relates to running, as it relates to cultural and social identity, racial identity, is this happening, this injustice that occurred in Brunswick, Georgia, about 3 hours away from where we are right now with Ahmaud Arbery.
Yeah, so I was actually about to go for a run when I actually heard about it. And, people that know me, a lot of them know me as a runner. So like, my phone was just like going crazy. I would have thought that it was like, something that was immediate to me, like family or something, you know what I mean? But it was just people expressing their concern for me running, because I run everywhere. And it happened close to like where I'm from, Vidalia, Georgia. It's like it's a skip and a hop from Brunswick. So like, when I think about it, I was just in a place of like, what do I do now? You know what I mean? Like, I can't even run down the street, like, without fear of somebody wanting to do something to me. You know what I mean? Especially when I feel like me and James and, people, a lot of the people that are part of our club, like, we pour into each other. You know what I mean? We cross different cultural identities and like have this sense of like empathy and I don't know, just kind of an awareness about how sensitive things can be sometimes. And that moment in particular just kind of, shook me, because it was so close to home. Running is something that I do all the time. And, while it was emotional, I still felt, almost like a fire was lit under my ass. Like, you know what I'm saying? Nah, we going running today. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not gonna let fear stand in the way of what we do and how we connect with people and like that kind of thing, you know what I mean? So it just kind of made me stand even more firm in my blackness. And one of my friends always tells me, like, the older you get, the blacker you get. You know what I mean? You start just being more in touch with yourself, you know what I mean? And really trying to figure out who you are as a black man, and like, digging through your traumas and things that you had to deal with as a younger person. And, the sport of running wasn't introduced to me until later in life. Or, I didn't see it as a thing that I would be doing. And, just to see somebody's life being taken that looks like me, probably sounds like me, you know what I mean, has family that looks like mine. As we all know, this is something that we see on a daily basis. You can hop on any of these social media platforms at any time of the day and see the same thing happening, you know what I mean? So I know this has been like lengthy, but I tell James all the time, when he'll tell you, bro, when we start talking about like black people and like that's one of the things that I'm super passionate about. You know what I mean? Like, as much as I cross all these other cultural identities and like lines with people, and I'm able to blend, me being black is something that I stand super firm in. And I'm to bring it back around to your question, like, that was one of the pivotal moments in my life that propelled me forward in like what I need to be doing. Like, this is something that people need to see us doing. So, it just kind of encouraged me. And like, obviously one of the more sadder situations that has happened in my community. But you know, energy is transferable. So I take a piece of what has happened in that situation and allow it to push me forward.
Now, tensions continued to rise in 2020 and ultimately continued to bleed over into 2021, where we are today. And just a few minutes down the road, not far away from here, where we're shooting at, recording today, there were shootings that occurred at a place called Gold Spa. Just kind of walk us through what it was when you heard and saw the news and what it meant for it to be so close to home.
Yeah. So I think for me, it was a very drawn out process of really trying to decipher what I felt. I wasn't quite sure. When things kind of like escalate with social media and there's a lot of like reposting of stories and people are saying things, I have a tendency to kind of fall back almost and kind of observe everything. It was quite foreign to me for a couple of reasons. One, I felt like it was kind of at the height of these like targeted Asian stories from like the pandemic and all these different narratives that basically like led to this escalated event of the shooting affecting specifically the Asian American community. And second, like I don't ever recall like this type of experience happening like growing up. Personally, I've experienced a lot of microaggressions and different parts of my past where if I really think back to it, right, like I think this person was being racist to me, or I think this person was saying this or implying that. And I don't mean to like generalize all that. I think there are also times where it comes from a place of like not knowing and of ignorance, right? But I was literally trying to like piece what was happening and like moments of my past and bring it together. And yeah, it was, long story short, just a very long, drawn-out process of like, what do I actually feel? Like, what is actually happening? Kind of observing the reaction of like how my parents took it, how my friends took it that were Asian, how some of my non-Asian friends like showed up and supported. But yeah, I'd say still to this day, I'm still trying to like decipher. It was such a tragic event that happened. It was such a like monumental moment, specifically because it happened in Atlanta and it happened to Korean members, some of them being Korean. And so there was a part of me that like definitely felt like it hit so close to home in a way. I couldn't quite understand like the intricacies of everything, but it hit close. And something that me and Bam have in common is that we have conflict based on who we are. That's just the way that we're growing up as minorities, right? Not always conflict, but there's always challenges that like come with it, not fitting into a place or not feeling like you're fitting into a place. So in that moment when I heard about the tragedy, it just like blew up, right? And so all my childhood moments and recollections of me feeling out of place, me feeling like targeted, like it just rushed in the span of like 48 hours. And in the same way that Bam's phone like blew up, like my phone was just going crazy, of like, hey, just checking in, making sure you're okay. And yeah, I'd say like, again, even to this day, I'm still kind of learning to move on from that. And I'd say one thing that really developed from that space in time was me like being extra curious to how do I celebrate myself like proactively? How do I let people know about myself and my culture more? And in the same sense, like Bam said, as the older you get, the more blacker you get. Like I feel that with my Koreanness too, is that when I was younger, I felt like being Korean was almost a curse because I felt so different. But as I get older, it's like, man, it's like the greatest gift to me and my people that we have. And how do we like, in a beautiful way, like communicate that to the rest of the people?
ARC is a vehicle. When you are a part of it, you feel just disconnected from everything and more connected to yourself. It brings out like you know, the real you almost, you know what I mean? Like you have these like formed personalities and like, you know, different things that external factors have semi-control over. And I think ARC is one of those spaces that when you come, you feel like you can let down your guard a little more. And it might take a couple of times, you know what I mean? Because it's new to some people, but when you come, you can be your full self.
I'd say that Atlanta Run Club is really a space, first and foremost, as I mentioned before, a space of belonging, but a place where we can just come together and like almost tune out the noise of like everything else happening in the world. And for me, that's what running is. It's a stress reliever. It's a way for me to like zone in and reflect on my thoughts. Like I think I come up with like, in my opinion, like the best ideas and like the most creative solutions like when I'm running. And so I really just envision ARC being a bigger version of that.
You know, if he wasn't Korean and I wasn't black, then, you know, and we just look the same, then people would automatically assume we brothers. Like we gonna have like lunch and discuss business and people come to the table and I'm like, yeah, that's my brother James. You know, if I've been there before, he'll tell you, like, you know what I mean? And that's just the kind of person that I am. People that know me know that I'm like loyal to the T. So like, if I rock with you, then we gonna run it up. We gonna go to the end. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's kind of where we are.
And so I think one of the gross parallels that we can see here is the fact that, you know, when the riots did happen in '92 with Rodney King and a lot of the other injustices that were occurring back then almost 30 years ago, we can almost push that up to today, and you can see how, again, a relationship like this is a bit of an anomaly. When you look back and you see almost 30 years ago how there are tensions that exist between communities instead of having the ability to unify and say, hey, like, no, both of us are being wronged in this situation. Why don't we stand with each other? Why don't we ally with each other? And why don't we show the world that I can be myself and you can be yourself, and we can stand for the same thing and being able to unify together for the sake of justice and equality being created. And so when I think about obviously all the things that happened in 2020, I think about the injustices that occurred, and I think about how like there was a movement for the equality for Black lives. And then we see Stop Asian Hate, and we see how there was a merging that literally happened all around the world, multiple continents. You got stuff happening in Europe, you got stuff happening in Asia, you got stuff happening over here in America, in Africa. You got Say Their Name plastered all over TVs and billboards, and people protesting actively in the streets. Some of the biggest protests and some of the biggest galvanizing for good that we have seen in a lifetime, in our lifetime. It is happening cross-continent, cross-culturally, cross-societies, all because people want equality. And so when I think about that, I would love to kind of maybe hear a little bit right now just about what you all have been able to do with ARC and been able to raise money and all the miles you've been able to run, the campaigns that you've been able to be a part of, and speak to the unity from not just the Black side, but like also the Asian American side as well.
Yeah, so I let people know when it comes to, I guess, how ARC operates, a lot of different fronts. I think at its deepest, like inner core level, everything you mentioned earlier on, like it's a space of belonging where people can come together and feel like they're at home, especially it being a just birth from a place where, where identity was a conflict for myself. And that's kind of like the starting point of ARC. For me, it was a place where, you know, people can come together to really feel like they're at home in a sense and not be judged and feel out of place. So at the deepest core, that's like the reason of his existence. But when you bring different people together and different people groups together, everyone has like a different sense of home, right? So I think when you scale out the purpose and the vehicle of ARC, it becomes an opportunity to really mobilize on this like social justice, like cultural front. And so when we tapped into that, we realized, man, this is such a powerful opportunity for us to like communicate to the people around us, like this is the message that we're trying to portray. So when it came specifically to Black Lives Matter, Stop Asian Hate, like one of the more cultural initiatives that were going on and still happening, we just used the vehicle of running to respond to it. And running is something that can, one, create like this collective like participation And second, like there's always a common goal in running. Like there's a finish line. There's something that people can run towards and not necessarily away from. So we basically developed like different campaigns throughout the past couple of years. The first, like, I think cultural theme like runs we did was the Love and Justice run here at the studio. And then recently the Stop Asian Hate run in March when the tragedy happened. So created a system to where people can basically like come and just run and collectively participate in this mission that we are trying to communicate.
I love it. I think that you all have done an incredible job at cultivating just this wonderful sense of common unity. And that's what community is. People, they meet up, they express and discuss some things, they share thoughts and emotions and ideas with one another, and they bond. And you do it again, and you do it again, and over time you've been able to forge incredible friendships and relationships that can literally last you a lifetime.
We have more in common than our minds can imagine. And in our conditioning, we've been made to believe that barriers are too bold to be broken. We've perceived that our differences are somehow dangerous. And in this, we diminish the opportunity to establish common unity among us. But on the other side of the lies that we believed lives the opportunity to connect and create true change. And we usher that change into the world when we are brave enough to address our own internal issues. When we embrace the scars that lineages before us left behind and abandon the belief that we cannot do life together. We cultivate change when we believe and embrace the fact that we belong to each other. We can undo the damages. We can rewrite the narrative. We can use our influence to invite others into what it means to feel welcome. We can galvanize for good, creating spaces where no one has to sacrifice their authenticity to feel accepted, where people are free to both be and to become. We can create a new normal where we can truly be carried by community.